Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast, hosted by Dr. Erin Phillips, Director of Cross-Cutting Programs and Acting Senior Director of Research at the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. The show highlights SER's role in supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development in the state of Wyoming.
Thank you for joining us today on Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape. With me today is Scott Quillinan, the Acting Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources. Scott, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Erin.
So, Scott, you were previously on the podcast in one of our earliest episodes.
That's true.
Talking about SER's Maori project. That was way back in episode 4. So it's great to have you back. And would you let our listeners know just a brief glimpse into the path that brought you to your current position here at SER?
Sure. So starting my career, my first job was at the Wyoming State Geological Survey. And so I started there in the coal office, and I worked at the Geologic Survey for about 5 years, moving around from office to office, trying to work on as many disciplines as I could. And that include coal, hydrology, conventional oil and gas, unconventional resources. But after about 5 years, the state geologist at the time moved over to the School of Energy Resources, and he was brought on to oversee a high-profile project. And so when he moved over, he convinced me and several others from the Geologic Survey at the time to join SER. And so my idea was to do something interesting, buy a little bit of time, have a little fun while we're doing it. But I was eventually heading into industry. So my time at SER was not going to be permanent. It was just going to be a short glimpse.
All right. Well, and you stayed for a while.
I did. And so, when I started at SER and I started to interview for other jobs as I was working on this project, but those jobs always seemed like they were interviews in Houston. And, there's nothing wrong with Houston. There's nothing wrong with Texas. But as I started to go down and interview for those, I just realized that I really wanted to live and raise my family here in Wyoming. And so that was really a turning point in my career for me. It forced me to think less about what a traditional career path would look like, but more along a career path that would have impact and allow me to live where I wanted to live.
It's great you got to stay in Wyoming. So your most recent role here at the School of Energy Resources was as Senior Director of Research, and you managed a very large portfolio of externally funded projects. Tell us a little bit about the most significant lessons you learned about translating your academic research into applied economic development for the state of Wyoming.
The biggest lesson I learned is that good science by itself doesn't automatically equal impact. So you can have excellent research and it still doesn't move the needle for the state. At SER, we've learned that research has to be designed with the end in mind. From the beginning, we start asking questions like, how could this generate revenue? How does it advantage Wyoming energy resources and minerals? What infrastructure would be required to make this real? And could this actually support development of a new industry? So the framing changes everything. It forces you to think beyond just academic publications and really start thinking about deployment. It also helps the research is relevant, and not just to scientists, but to our elected officials, to our partners, our communities. If those groups can't quickly understand why the project matters, it's unlikely to gain support and unlikely to move forward. So it doesn't really matter how good the science is sometimes.
Yeah, I think for me in this role, it's just that applied aspect of our research is really rewarding.
You've probably heard me say this 1,000 times, but we don't do research for the sake of doing research at SER. Our goal is really to accelerate that R&D process. And in my experience, if you do that, you can move things out of the lab and into the field.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Scott, let's move on to leadership here. This is a common theme on our podcast and a really important one. So you are a Evanston, Wyoming native, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And as you said, it's really clear that you've dedicated your career to advancing energy technology for the betterment of the state of Wyoming. And how does this personal commitment to Wyoming influence your leadership philosophy as the acting executive director of SER?
Well, I would say that it makes things pretty simple, honestly. This is home. The decisions we make at SER affect people that I know, the communities that we care about, and the places that I've really spent my entire life. So that creates a level of accountability that you don't always get in a leadership role that's a little more abstract. You don't get to hide behind buzzwords. At the grocery store, you have to look at people that are affected by the decisions you're making. You hear about them at the football game. So to be honest, I try to lead in a way that's practical, honest, and focused on the long term. So flashy ideas don't matter if they don't work. And in Wyoming, if they disappear as soon as the funding ends. For me, leadership is about building things that last, programs, teams, partnerships that can really stand over the test of time.
Excellent. Let's continue to talk about leadership a little bit. You were a member of the Leadership Wyoming class of 2024. And I want to talk a little bit about that. What are one or two key insights that you gained from that experience, and how is that shaping SER's engagement with Wyoming communities and policymakers?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that Leadership Wyoming really is a life-changing experience. It's an opportunity for personal growth, but it's also a chance to build a network of really tremendous leaders from across the state. People working on many of the same challenges, just in different places and industries. One of the biggest takeaways for me was realizing how common our challenges really are. So you'd learn about what they're dealing with in Pinedale, and you would say, well, that's actually not too different than we're dealing with in Laramie here, or what we heard about in Gillette, or the challenges that Rock Springs has. So the details change, but really the underlying issues of economic transition and workforce needs and infrastructure and housing, those are all really remarkably similar. So beyond the network and leadership development, Leadership Wyoming also really opens the door for some of those truly authentic Wyoming experiences. You're not just out in the state learning about it, you're actually in it. So an example of some of those experiences, so we were, had the opportunity to pregnancy check a cow, perform an ultrasound. We were down in the Trona mines. We did a ride along with local law enforcement, did some really incredible hikes, and those experiences just gave you a deeper appreciation for the people and the industries that keep Wyoming running.
Yeah, such an exceptional program for the state. It sounds like you had some good adventures. And from a personal growth standpoint, it was also really the first time in my career that I was able really to just disconnect from the day-to-day responsibilities and really focus on myself as a leader. Spent time thinking about how I'm perceived, how I approach problems, how I react under stress, what my blind spots might be. And I'm just really grateful for my classmates for, creating that space and the kind of honest reflection that was possible. Great. Well, Scott, I've had the privilege of working with you the entire time I've been here at SER, which is almost 9 years now, and I have really appreciated your mentorship. So you have been at SER for quite a while now, and that gives you a unique perspective, and you've served under two previous directors, including Dr. Mark Northam and Dr. Holly Krutka. How have the leadership styles and strategic priorities of your predecessors shaped SER into the institution that we have today?
In my opinion, each director really brought something important to SER, and the organization is stronger because of that. So Mark was very focused on building, he was the first director, so he was really focused on building credibility, laying that solid foundation. And in those early years, it was really about establishing SER as a serious and trusted institution, both within the university, but also nationally. And so that groundwork, in my opinion, was really critical. And remember, SER was a novel idea, and it's still a unique concept today. So when Holly came in, Holly really emphasized our partnerships, the integration with the broader university. She focused a lot on our culture and growth. She really pushed SER to think bigger and how we work across campus with industry and with external partners. I think each of them were really here at SCR at the right time for their specific skill sets. But if you'll let me just talk a little bit more about Holly. I did work with her in a little bit more of a leadership capacity. I found her to be a really incredible leader, a real model in how she would lead with intention. Over the last 5, almost 6 years, I guess, I truly enjoyed the opportunity to work with her and to really build upon that strong foundation that already existed at SCR. Holly was really deeply focused on impact, what we were doing on a day-to-day and how it affected our state, our partners, and especially our staff. I remember many days when we were facing a challenge, whatever it could be, oftentimes those conversations would just start with the two of us brainstorming right here in this office where we're doing the podcast today. Working through the different possibilities, we'd sort of pressure test them a little bit, but always being very deliberate about how our decisions would affect the people and the staff at SCR and what the impact would be to the state. So she was always really thinking about not just the outcome, but about how we would get there. How do we create the impact for Wyoming, and while also supporting our team, how do we make these tough decisions without losing trust? Holly was really a student of leadership, and she was constantly reflecting on how she could do better. And that mindset really pushed the rest of us to step up and bring our A game.
Definitely agreed that Holly is a exceptional leader. Well, Scott, now in your new role as acting executive director, what area of focus or strategic shift do you feel is necessary to implement in this position to best position SCR in the state for the next decade of energy challenges?
Great question. So what comes to mind is 2 to 3 different areas of focus. First, I think it's important to really double down on the demonstration and deployment that we have at SCR. Wyoming and SCR is exceptionally good at moving things out of theory and into practice. We have the resources, the infrastructure, the workforce, and frankly, the mindset to take technologies out of the lab and prove them at scale. So if we can show that something works here in real world conditions, that's where the true economic opportunity is. That's when projects start attracting investment and building infrastructure and creating jobs. So a good example of this is the coal refinery that's being built right now in Gillette. That concept started in the lab, it progressed through the pilot scale research, and today it's under construction at the Wyoming Innovation Center. So if you have the opportunity to drive by the site, you can actually see the different components and equipment coming together. They're painted brown and gold for Wyoming, which actually makes me proud. But coal's one of our largest natural resources. And if we can bring it into higher value products like building materials and bricks and soil amendments and asphalts and graphite and other advanced materials, that's what deployment looks like. And that's the model we need to continue to replicate at SCR. So that would be my number one. The next one I would really think about is how we can continue to make Wyoming energy industries regulation proof. So Wyoming, as you know, is the second largest producer of energy on public lands. And because of that, we often experience the impacts of administration changes in Washington probably more directly than anybody else. So that uncertainty can create hesitation among investors and project developers. And one of SCR's roles is to help reduce that uncertainty by advancing technologies that allow Wyoming resources to remain competitive across a wide range of regulatory scenarios. So if I had an example of that, I would bring in our work on carbon capture and storage. CCS just has the potential to help Wyoming coal and natural gas, and it keeps it thriving even as emission regulations evolve. And the third area that I think is becoming increasingly important is the future energy demand. We are really entering into a period of growing electricity demand that we probably haven't seen in recent history. So data centers and other emerging industries are going to require massive amounts of reliable power. And so meeting that demand will be a large feat, and Wyoming has a real opportunity to be a solution if we continue to plan ahead. So I guess from a leadership perspective, my focus is on positioning SCR to anticipate these shifts rather than react to them, and align our research, academics, and outreach so we're really prepared for the next generation of energy challenges.
Great. Yeah, lots of exciting work going on in these emerging industries right now, and I think Wyoming is right at the center of it. So, Scott, you've worked on many projects at SER during your time here and overseen many others. And so this might be a tough question, but do you have an absolute favorite project that you personally worked on, or you can give us 2 or 3 if you'd like?
So you're right. That is a tough question. One that really comes to mind is Wyoming Carbon Safe, and that was our project at Dry Fork Station and really advancing carbon storage at that location. But why it was my favorite, because it really brought together, it was multidisciplinary. It brought together the engineering, geology, the economics, the policy development, the community outreach, really brought it together under an umbrella of what the project ended up being. And I would say since then, we've sort of designed all of our projects to be multidisciplinary like that. And I think it's really advancing the impact of them. If I had to think of a second project, I mean, there are several, but I do love the Mowry project. At the same time, we are also making major progress on the Mowry project, which is now entering the phase 3. So just a reminder, that project was originally designed to build a cohort of faculty and students at the University of Wyoming that was really focused on unlocking Wyoming's largest unconventional oil and gas play. We've continued to make incredible progress on the technical side, but what I didn't really anticipate was the ripple effect that this project would have across campus. So the Mowry project has really significantly increased UW's capacity to support subsurface oil and gas research. Beyond building that truly multidisciplinary faculty cohort, it helped us stand up the multidisciplinary advanced stimulation laboratory. So this lab is focused on improving primary recovery from Wyoming's conventional and unconventional resources. And it's really looking at tackling challenges like stimulation fluids and proppant transport, improving fracking efficiency, looking at rock physics, geomechanics, and geologic engineering. And it's also working across all scales, so from the nanoscale to taking it out to the field scale. So on top of that, the lab really supports innovative drilling technologies and the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning in subsurface operations. So I didn't realize when we started the Mowry project that it would really kick off such a big effect across campus.
Yeah, it's been so great to see the progress on the Mowry project. And I also have a soft spot for Carbon Safe, since that's what I came over here to work on in the first place. So an equally difficult question. What's an example of one of your favorite exciting new projects to be developed here at SER that can have a positive impact on the state?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. Instead of a project name, let me give you a few topic areas that I'm excited to continue to work in. So one, I feel that there's just a tremendous opportunity to continue to advance oil and gas research at the University of Wyoming. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that from an oil and gas perspective, the Powder River Basin is still very much an exploratory basin. Even with decades of drilling and thousands of wells, we're still discovering new oil-bearing formations, new traps, new ways hydrocarbons are being stored, and new ways to produce them. And at the same time, it's also pretty well known that drilling in Wyoming costs more than it does in other basins. So that's driven by access to oil field services, frac sand, water, along with weather. It snows here in Wyoming, and those winters can really cause havoc on operations. So all of that adds up to overall higher well costs. And as we continue to build capacity here at UW and SCR, we can work closely with our industry partners to continue to reduce those costs through innovation and really trying to make Wyoming basins competitive and attractive as other basins. So if I was to go beyond oil and gas, I want to just maybe bring in 2 different topic areas. So beyond oil and gas, the coal to products is another major growth area for us. With the coal refinery being built, we're just starting to scratch the surface on what carbon-based products can be. And coal is, as you know, is an important resource for Wyoming. And one way to make it more regulation-proof, as I've mentioned, is to diversify the markets that it serves. And so moving beyond coal being solely for energy and instead using it as a carbon feedstock opens up entirely new opportunities. So we're looking at carbon-based building materials like bricks and pavers and facade elements that not only improve the aesthetics of buildings, but also enhance the building performance. It gives us better insulation, improved energy efficiency, and I would also mention another really promising area is the coal to asphalt work. So using coal-derived materials to pave roads, to open up very large, durable markets for Wyoming coal. Roads are something that we'll always need, and these types of products require significant volumes of material. So all of that work is under Trina Pfeiffer, and we'll continue to see that program really grow. The other growth area that I would really quickly like to mention is critical minerals. As we move deeper into a digital economy, the demand for rare earth elements and critical minerals is growing exponentially. Wyoming has a real potential to help stand up a domestic supply chain around critical minerals, from resource assessment to processing and production, and it's not only a national priority, but it's a major opportunity for our state.
Yeah, definitely a lot of momentum in the critical minerals space right now. All right, so beyond Wyoming, you've represented the School of Energy Resources all over the world, including in China, Japan, Norway, and India. What specific energy opportunities for Wyoming do you see in developing these global relationships and partnerships?
Yeah, so doing the international work is one of the favorite parts of my job. I really enjoy just getting out and seeing, how energy is produced and managed and moved and used and really all over the world. So other countries are dealing with many of the same energy challenges we are. They're looking at energy security, reliability, affordability. Wyoming's energy leadership is not just about powering our nation, but I feel like we can play a meaningful role in shaping both the global energy discussion and supplying energy to global markets. So that's becoming increasingly clear in other countries that face resource constraints and growing geopolitical challenges. Wyoming has a real opportunity to help provide reliable energy to those key global markets. So one example, most recently we've been working with Japan and other Southeast Asian markets to better understand their long-term needs for natural gas and coal and other resources. I recently had the opportunity to travel to Tokyo and met with several energy companies and government agencies to talk specifically about the future energy supply. And Erin, what really struck me was that nearly every single organization we met with, either public or private, had teams of experts focused on one core question, and that was how do we continue to secure reliable natural gas to meet our future energy demand? And so from Wyoming's perspective, that really creates a strategic opportunity. So Wyoming producers are well positioned because the infrastructure already exists to move natural gas to the West Coast. And the West Coast export routes are especially attractive because shipments don't have to pass through the Panama Canal to get to Asian markets. And so that significantly reduces the transit time to Asian markets. And so shorter delivery times matter, and economically from a supply security standpoint, our gas is strategic. And so these international conversations continue to make me think a little bit differently about our energy products here in Wyoming. Wyoming doesn't just produce energy, we really do provide stability to other states, and in this international discussion, I think potentially other countries. So I'm hoping that through SER, we can help connect Wyoming resources and research and innovation to global needs and that really benefits our state, supports our producers, and strengthens those long-term markets.
Very good. So Scott, as we wrap up here, I have a couple more questions for you. What are you most excited about in your new role as acting executive director of SER?
Another great question. Thanks, Erin. So I would say the people, without question. SER has a really great crew. We have people here who care deeply about Wyoming. They're brilliant. They're willing to take on hard problems. And that's really something you can't take for granted. So as I move into this role, I'm really realizing that a big part of my job is to help people here do their best work, to focus on removing roadblocks, set direction, and really make sure their efforts are aligned with something that truly matters. So what excites me the most is really helping the team see the impact of what they're doing. A lot of our work is complex, it's long-term, and it's easy to lose sight of how meaningful it really can be. And so part of my role is making sure that that connection stays visible, that people know that their work is really being valued, that it's making a difference for the state, and that it's helping building something that's lasting. So I find that incredibly motivating. If I can help good people do great work and do it in a way that it serves Wyoming, then I feel like I'm in the right place.
I appreciate that, and SER is a great place to be. So, all right. So where do you hope to see the School of Energy Resources in the next 5 years?
In 5 years, I hope SER is known as the place where energy ideas turn into real-world solutions, where research doesn't stop at the lab door, but really moves into the field and creates tangible value for Wyoming. I think we're there, but I think we need to continue doing that. I also want to make sure SER is viewed as a trusted, steady partner by the state, by our industry partners, by our communities, and by the university. An organization that people turn to when they're trying to solve complex energy problems, because they know we'll bring the technical rigor, the practical thinking, and the understanding of Wyoming's unique context. From a research standpoint, I want us to continue strengthening our role in the large-scale demonstration and deployment. That probably means more projects like the coal refinery, more carbon safes, more integrated test centers, projects that build capacity, workforce experience, and long-term opportunity for the state. Really, it's not just about winning grants, it's really building that long-term capability that lasts beyond single projects. And I guess the last point I would make is internally, I want SER to be a place where people can really build meaningful careers without feeling like they have to leave Wyoming to do nationally relevant work. And that means investing in our staff and really supporting professional growth, creating clear pathways for people to advance and to take on leadership roles. And so if we're doing that well, we'll continue to attract and retain the exceptional talent that we have at SER. So I'll just end by saying that I hope SER continues to help Wyoming navigate change, whether that's a shift in the energy markets or its policy or its demand, or by being proactive rather than reactive. I think in 5 years from now, if SER is seen as the institution that helped Wyoming stay competitive, resilient, and forward-looking, then I consider that a success.
Excellent. Well, I know I'm excited to get out across the state of Wyoming to work on a lot of these projects that you've talked about today. So I have one more question for you. In 2024, we asked you this question, and you said your favorite place in Wyoming was your family's cabin south of Mountain View, Wyoming. So I'm going to ask you a slightly different question today. Where's your second favorite place to visit in Wyoming, and why?
Okay, well, I'll say my first favorite place is still the cabin.
All right.
Okay, second favorite place. Let me say War Memorial Stadium.
All right.
Go Pokes.
Lots of good memories.
Yeah, and hopefully it's a Saturday we're beating CSU.
All right. Excellent answer. All right. Well, thanks so much, Scott, for being here today, and look forward to continuing our work together.
All right. Thanks, Erin. Thanks for having me. And thanks for taking over the podcast. I really appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun so far. Thanks to our listeners. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.